Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ, King of endless glory. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ, King of endless glory. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, Lord.
6 days before Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. They gave a dinner for him there, and Martha served, while Lazarus was one of those reclining at table with him. Mary took a liter of costly perfumed oil, made from genuine aromatic nard, and anointed the feet of Jesus and dried them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. Then Judas the Iscariot, one of his disciples and the one who would betray him, said, "Why was this oil not sold for 300 days' wages and given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, held the money bag, and used to steal the contributions. So Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Let her keep this for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." The large crowd of the Jews found out that he was there and came, not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. And the chief priests plotted to kill Lazarus too, because many of the Jews were turning away and believing in Jesus because of him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
First of all, it's good to see so many people at Daily Mass this morning. It's great, setting Holy Week apart. This morning we hear about 6 days before the Passover. Right? So again, we're hearing about things that took place during Holy Week. And one of the things that happened was Jesus was at this dinner, and Mary took a liter of costly perfumed oil and anointed his feet and dried them with her hair. And the response of Judas Iscariot is always striking. He says, "Why didn't she take this oil and sell it so that she could give it to the poor?" And this is something that, even sometimes today you'll hear people say things in the church like this. Why do we spend so much money on different parts of the Mass or about building beautiful churches? Why don't we give all of our money to the poor? I've heard people say that before when they travel to the Vatican, for example, and they see the extravagance of the Vatican. They think, why shouldn't all this just be given to the poor? And maybe you can make a case for that. Sometimes, maybe there can be a little bit too much corruption in the church at times. But the point remains what Jesus says: you will always have the poor with you, but you will not always have him. Mary was showing virtue in her act. It's the virtue of extravagance for that which is the highest good. The virtue of extravagance. Maybe it's not something we think about very often. One of the ways that I learned about this was St. John Vianney. He's the patron saint of all parish priests, and St. John Vianney was known for living a very poor, impoverished lifestyle. All he ate every day was baked potatoes, for example. So he had a very strict diet. He wore clerics and cassocks that had holes in them and shoes that had holes in them. But when it came to the Mass, he insisted on purchasing the most expensive vestments, the vestments that were handcrafted. Because he insisted that when it comes to the Lord, when it comes to the Mass and the worship we give to him, he deserves everything. And so the Mass should be extravagant. Sometimes people will still think about this in the church, and they'll say things, like, why do we have, so many altar servers, or why do we put so much effort into the different music that we propose, or anything like that, right? And the point remains, we want the Mass to be something that is extravagant. Sometimes people will make comments about when people show signs of particular piety. And again, they'll say things like, those people are just standing out. But again, the point remains, those people are being extravagant, even in their signs of piety that they're showing to the Lord. Extravagance is a very good thing when it comes to the Mass, but also when it comes to the life of holiness. The saints, what makes them different from everybody else is not that they were good people, right? Lots of people are good people who are trying to be obedient to the commandments of God, etc. But the saints, they live something that is called heroic virtue, which means it's something that is above and beyond what is required of them. That's one of the beautiful things when you read about the lives of the saints, especially the modern saints, because they seem so much more relatable to us. You see how they took their natural lives and they made them extravagantly in service of the Lord. And it doesn't just mean you have to become a priest or you have to become a nun. Many lay saints, you read about their lives and about how they gave themselves extravagantly in service. I think it's one of the beautiful things about here at St. Bernard. We have a number of people in our parish who very much live this virtue of extravagance. And they give so much time to service in the church, where many people look at them and think, why are you giving all this time? There's something beautiful about it. Our life given to God should be extravagant, and some may even see it as somewhat unreasonable. Why do you give so much time and effort in service? It's because God deserves everything. So I think about that when I think about all of our many volunteers who give countless hours here. They're living that virtue of extravagance. I think it's something for all of us to reflect on as we begin this Holy Week. Before I go sit down, I just have to make a practical announcement. We've been using the communion kneeler here at St. Bernard for the last few months. One of the reasons why I did this is because so many people kneel for communion anyway, and I thought it was kind of a safety hazard for people. Some people have a hard time getting up from communion when they do that. But it was recently brought to my attention that our former bishop, Bishop Higgy, he forbade the use of communion kneelers. And so much time has gone by that a number of priests and parishes, they were starting to bring them back. But our current bishop has reinstated, right? He's clarified that he wishes to keep that tradition. Okay? So I do apologize. I know that that's kind of heartbreaking for some of you, and maybe you can write a letter, or maybe you can sincerely request, right, that the diocese might change its stance. But for the time being, it's important for us to be obedient. So for the time being, we're not going to be using communion kneeler until we receive further notice.